Vinicius Jr. is off to a blazing start for Ancelotti's Real Madrid, looking nearly unrecognizable to the player he was in the past couple of seasons. Hey, I'm Adrian and welcome to yet another video where this time we'll look at Vinicius, his time at Real Madrid thus far, and how he has changed his game to become an important piece at Ancelotti's Real Madrid, from ridicule to breaking his own record. I've been lucky enough to get some help from Mudassa Hussein for this one. Mudassa is a prominent voice in the Real Madrid community online. In fact, the amount of you guys who suggested him when I made a call for your favorite Real Madrid creators was massive. He has his own podcast titled Real Talk, which gives Madridistas around the world an opportunity to share their thoughts, so be sure to check it out, linked below. But there's something else linked below, so why don't we thank our sponsors, OneFootball, for making this video possible. OneFootball is the best app out there for anyone who wants the latest breaking news, transfer stories and trackers, highlights and other videos, interviews, articles, live match trackers, and so much more all in one app. All of which is custom tailored to the players, teams, and competitions that you care the most about, just by giving them a follow within the app. So take advantage of the free download by using the link in the description, and thank you to OneFootball for supporting an independent creator such as myself. Alright, let's get going, guys. When he was signed by Real Madrid in May of 2017 for 46 million euros from Flamengo, you'd be excused if you didn't fully understand the transfer or know who he was. Vinicius Jr. was 16 at the time and had only made one senior appearance for his club, and yet he was the second most expensive player from the Brazilian league, second only to Neymar, of course. But there was reason for the interest. The signing wasn't made based off of his achievements within the Flamengo youth setup alone, as Vinicius was a top player in U17 international football. Vinicius played in and won the 2017 South American U17 Championship, scoring 7 goals along the way and being named the player of the tournament for his efforts. From 2017 through half of 2018, Vinicius scored 7 goals in total for Flamengo, spanning various competitions, and upon turning 18 in July of 2018, he joined Real Madrid. He missed out on playing with Ronaldo, of course, but at least Real Madrid didn't miss out on him.
Because obviously Barcelona were very close to signing Vinicius back then. They almost had a done deal, and then Uni Calafat obviously came in as a saviour on his white horse. You know, when the two big boys in Spain are fighting over talent and are willing to pay close to 50 million for him, there's something about this kid, right? So I started watching him a bit, and he was exactly the same as what we saw in that first season. This kid, you know, who was fearless. He'd make mistakes, sure, he'd make a ton of mistakes, but he'd also have a lot of fun, and he'd make football just look enjoyable, and he'd look like he's enjoying himself, and he'd just pick up the ball with the intention, just go head down, I'm going to take on my marker, you know. Sure, he would sometimes lose that battle, but there was a lot of moments that he won the battles, you know, and it was that moment where you thought, yeah, this kid is special, and you can see why Real Madrid have gone for him.
Do you think that expectations were a little bit unfairly high for Vinicius, that he was sort of expected, you know, with the price tag and with the player that you had lost, to sort of come in and make an instant impact?
Yeah, man, the expectations were huge for him. And as a teenager too, like, there's one thing coming into a Cristiano-less side, right? But when you're going to play in his position, there's a massive hole there of 450 goals. Yeah. it's a big gap to fill, you know, and as a teenager it must have been a very heavy burden, but he dealt with it so well. And I distinctly remember that season. Benzema was good that season. He was obviously our best player, but Vinicius was that player who just brought smiles to our faces. He was the one catalyst for excitement, you know. He was that player who would drive forward, who would cause excitement, who would cause trouble, who would cause mayhem. I still remember the Clásicos that he sent PK left and right and spinning PK constantly. You know, he was fun. What we got from him was hope, and I guess that's the biggest thing I could say about Vinicius.
But But once that first season plot armor had faded, the expectations began to build to a point where if there weren't any frequent goal contributions, the guillotine would drop, so to speak. In his second season, he still contained the ability to run at defenders, but suddenly he would try to beat a player twice or 3 times. His final ball would come far too late, or by the time he would decide to take on a shot, his finishing wasn't up to snuff. The things that were easy to look past in his first season, given the joie de vivre he brought to Real Madrid, were suddenly glaring. Twitter, of course, is by no means representative of an entire fan base, but if you were to look at Real Madrid Twitter on any given match day, the Vinicius slander was prolific. When would you say that, following that first season where he brought that hope and he brought smiles to the faces of the supporters, when would you say that it started to turn a little bit and they started to get a little bit frustrated with his lack of a final ball or something like that?
I'd say his second season. I think the first season was pretty impressive because no one expected much from him, And I guess the second season expectations grow a bit and you thought, there was no signings and we needed something there. He obviously didn't deliver in terms of goals and assists as regularly as we hoped. But then the problem is these days, players like Mbappe and Haaland have completely ruined our expectations of youngsters, they're doing things which you shouldn't expect from a teenager or someone who's 21, right? Every weekend these days I'm looking at a PSG and Dortmund match and they've both scored. That's not normal. And so I think we need to somehow come back to some form of normality when we're judging talents. So I think, that second season was where he started overthinking a bit in his final phase, where he looked to do too much almost. He'd almost look to do something flashy or like an extra couple of stepovers, which would lose that opportunity to make that pass. And then frustrations would grow and then the teammates would start moaning.
Teammates moaning about Vinicius was best illustrated during Real Madrid's 2-2 draw against Borussia Mönchengladbach in the 2020-21 Champions League. At halftime, you'll probably remember the tunnel camera picking up both the audio and video of Karim Benzema saying to his French compatriot Ferland Mendy, quote, "Brother, don't pass to him. On my mother's life, he is playing against us." When the fans criticize you, that's one thing. But Benzema's words about Vinicius' play will have almost validated the critiques of the supporters further, and no doubt would have been a tough pill to swallow for Vinicius. But not so much the fact that these are thoughts that Benzema had and shared with a teammate, more that they were shared and shared and shared again as they went viral. How do you think that clip of Benzema speaking to Mendy, telling him not to pass to Vinicius, that he's playing against us, how do you think that affected Vinicius' reputation? I mean, from what I'm gathering, it sounds like it sort of exacerbated things. Do you think that he won any sort of sympathy from the supporters, that anyone sort of felt bad for him, or it just exacerbated it completely?
See, I think there's probably two sides of it. So there's one side of it that players do these things, right? Teammates do these things. Purely out of frustration, I guess. And I guess Benzema must have apologized to him in private and maybe it was resolved. Viewing it from the outside in, it can't have been nice, right? No. When you're young and you look up to this figure as a leader, you need him to let you in, put his arm around you at times when you make mistakes, right? And not that. That was a bit harsh. A bit unnecessary, I thought, from Benzema, and it clearly impacted Vinicius because there was a patch that he was very frustrating, even for someone who's supported him blindly almost since he arrived, given him so many chances. It's a tough club to play for, the fans get on your back very quickly, and so it would have been tough for him.
No doubt his confidence will have been shaken from the criticisms from the supporters, how he knew his teammates were talking behind his back, especially in a language he couldn't understand, and how he became a bit of a figure of fun because of that conversation. But within that same competition last season, the Champions League, Vinicius no doubt would have given his confidence quite the boost, and that could have provided a turning point for him. Against Liverpool at the Estadio Alfredo Di Stefano, he scored a brace, kissing the badge after each goal.
Yeah, that Liverpool match was huge. That was a big game. That was a huge game. This moment may have come a bit sooner had he not got injured against Ajax. And I still think, and it may be controversial, but I still think we would have put up a better fight against Ajax with him. It could have come a bit sooner, but yeah, the Liverpool match was the turning point because he showed, like, on the biggest stage against a team that had recently won the trophy, he can show up if needed, and the finishing was great.
5 goals in 5 is already a career high for Vinicius when it comes to his La Liga goals tally, as Vinicius has looked like one of the most dangerous attackers in the league. So what's changed? Is it simply that Carlo Ancelotti's famous man management skills have bore fruit via Vinicius's goal output? Or is there something else that's different about his game?
So there's a really good article actually by my good friend Matt Wiltzer. He's put together sort of a statistical piece where he put together 2 case studies last year and this year so far. He's clearly taking a lot less touches. So the article is about him taking a lot less touches in the box, right? His tendency, as I mentioned earlier, to overplay things and to overthink things. But he's clearly cut that out. And there's a poignant quote from Ancelotti in that piece.
Vinicius is very good in one-on-one situations. As for scoring goals, I've told him that it's rare to score after taking 5 or 6 touches. To score, you need 1 touch or maybe 2 maximum. You have to be in the box.
And he's done it, man. Like, you can see it. And the decision-making has improved by making that slight adjustment, because yesterday you saw his pass for the Benzema winner. That was inch perfect, you know. That sort of thing is what you expect from Neymar. Having just scored as well, he then creates the winner. That doesn't come from Vinicius last year or the season before, because the Vinicius before probably passes it back, or he decides, you know what, I've got a bit of space in front of me, why don't I run at this defender? And then the chance goes. It's that decision making, and it's that fine tuning which Zidane started, but Ancelotti clearly has come in and he's already said it. Like, Vinicius feels much more important this season.
As mentioned by Mudasa, Matt Wilsey did a fantastic comparison on the improvements made by Vinicius. Pulling data from FBref, a site that makes football stats accessible to all, he found that Vinny's shots per 90 minutes had increased to 2.84. Following the match against Valencia, that increased to 3.75, a full 3.12 improvement on his 2020-2021 numbers. The average distance from goal on shots taken has dropped significantly for him as well. As you can see from Wiltsey's article, he has consistently taken shots closer to goal over the seasons. And while his average bumped back up to 12.5 following the match against Valencia, he scored from that shot that was taken from distance, by the way, there's still a downward trend, which means he's getting closer and closer to goal before taking the shot. Thankfully, off the back of his recent performances, Benzema has gone public in saying that he has loved playing with Vinicius this season, thus putting to bed the whole "he plays against us" situation. Quote, "Vinicius is a phenomenon. I really like playing with him. He has shown that he can always play for Real Madrid. I am very happy for him." Say what you will about Vinicius Jr., his love for Real Madrid has never been shaken. Just recently, he spoke to Diario AS, saying that he wants to stay with the club for a long, long time, just as Marcelo, Ramos, and Benzema have during their careers. In this interview, he also spoke of how he has improved his game and what's contributing to that. Vinicius mentioned how he has his physiotherapist actually living at his house with him and working with him constantly to ensure that his body is in peak condition to perform, ensuring that his diet is in line and that he is resting properly to avoid injury. That is a consummate professional. On top of that, there were reports that he had hired a sports psychologist to help with his mental fortitude. No doubt a good idea given the day and age that footballers currently live in, with baptism by social media.
Because there's obviously been a lot of patches where he's been come under fire, and that's related to his, like, when he's through on goal, he'd just shank a shot. That's all up there, right? Like, he's got to know and he's got to believe in himself that he's capable of doing it. So he definitely hired someone to help him out there. He'd stay back with Zidane and practice his finishing, Cristiano-esque, come early and leave late, just to really focus on his fine tuning of his game, right? And sometimes, you know, in the game, there's a lot of examples where the fruits of their labor isn't shown immediately. It's almost down the line a bit, and perhaps that's what we're seeing with Vinicius here. We never really saw that last year. It was there in bits. It wasn't it wasn't as consistent as we're seeing it in this start of the season.
I think what we ultimately have to remember about Vinicius is the fact that he is just 21 years old. He arrived at Real Madrid having just turned 18, and yet it feels like he's been around forever because it was announced that Real Madrid had signed him when he was still just 16 years old. As mentioned by Mudasa, the Haalands and Mbappes of the world have kind of skewed the data a little bit on what it takes to be a quote-unquote good young player. But after 5 La Liga matches, having already snapped his scoring record, having added an end product to the pace and trickery that he already had, having received help to improve his mental fortitude, and from the great advice of Carlo Ancelotti, it feels like we're finally seeing the player that Vinicius has threatened to be in flashes, now with some added consistency. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to subscribe for more from us here at Rabona TV. A big shout out to Mudasa, whom you can follow on Twitter, again, linked below, and be sure to check out his podcast and get involved. Beyond that, thank you for your time, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.